The security guard at Hargrove Mall in Columbus, Ohio, had seen a lot of things in his 12 years on the job: shoplifters, runaways, medical emergencies. But nothing quite prepared him for the moment a little girl in a torn yellow raincoat sat completely alone on the cold tile floor near the food court entrance, holding a soggy paper bag like it was the most precious thing in the world. She couldn't have been older than 6. Her dark hair was matted against her forehead from the rain outside. Her shoes were soaked through, and she wasn't crying. That was the part that broke people. She wasn't crying at all. She just sat there with the quiet stillness of a child who had already learned that crying doesn't always bring help. And if you had walked past her that Tuesday evening in November, if you had been rushing to grab dinner or pick up something before the stores closed, what would you have done? Would you have stopped? Or would you have told yourself that someone else would handle it? Most people walked past her. That is the honest truth. Marcus Hale was not supposed to be at the mall that night. He was 34 years old, a plumber by trade, with calloused hands and a permanent tiredness behind his eyes that came not from laziness, but from raising his 7-year-old son, Owen, entirely on his own for the past 3 years. His wife, Renee, had passed from a sudden cardiac event when Owen was only 4. There had been no warning, no long illness to prepare them, just a Tuesday morning, a phone call, and then the rest of his life rearranged without his permission. Marcus had learned slowly and painfully to carry grief and responsibility at the same time, the way a man carries 2 heavy bags of groceries up a flight of stairs, not gracefully, but consistently. He had only stopped at Hargrove Mall because Owen had lost his winter gloves at school, and with temperatures dropping hard that week, Marcus didn't want his son's small hands going cold on the walk from the bus. It was a simple errand. He was tired. He just wanted to get the gloves and go home. He noticed the girl almost immediately, not because she was making noise, she wasn't, but because Owen noticed her first and tugged on Marcus's jacket with that particular urgency that children have when something feels wrong to them. Owen pointed without speaking, which was actually something he did often. He was a quiet boy, more observer than talker, which people sometimes mistook for sadness, but Marcus knew it was just the way Owen processed the world. He looked at the girl on the floor and then looked up at his father with a question in his eyes that he didn't need to say out loud. Marcus crouched down a few feet away from her, close enough not to seem distant, but far enough not to frighten her. He asked her gently if she was waiting for someone. She looked at him with enormous brown eyes, not fearful, not defiant, just watchful, and said that she was waiting for her mama to come back. She said it the same way someone might say they were waiting for a bus, matter of fact, patient, as though waiting was something she had practiced. Marcus felt something move through his chest that he didn't have a clean name for. It was somewhere between heartbreak and recognition. He sat down on the floor beside her, this grown man in work boots and a faded green jacket, and he didn't rush her or pepper her with questions. He just sat. Owen sat too, cross-legged, like this was a perfectly normal thing to do. The 3 of them sat on the cold mall floor while the noise of the food court hummed around them, and Marcus simply asked if she was hungry. She looked at the soggy paper bag in her hands and then slowly held it open to show him. It contained 3 crackers and a small plastic container of peanut butter, the kind that comes in a child's lunchbox. She had been rationing them. He could tell by the way she looked at them, not eating, just holding. Marcus bought her a hot meal from the nearest counter without making a production of it. He didn't ask her name yet. He didn't demand information. He just placed the tray in front of her and watched her eat with the careful relief of a child who hadn't been certain food was coming. Owen quietly slid her his extra napkins without being asked. Marcus saw it and had to look away for a moment. It was only after she had eaten that she told him her name was Avery. The mall security team had already been notified, and 2 officers approached Marcus with the kind of cautious authority that made sense given what they were seeing. A man they didn't know, sitting with a child they couldn't identify. Marcus stood up without agitation and said simply, in a calm voice that carried no ego or defensiveness, that she was with him, that he had found her alone, and that they needed to find her family. He didn't say it with bluster or impatience. He said it the way a man says something true, without needing to dress it up. What Marcus didn't know in that moment, what none of them knew yet, was that Avery had not simply been left behind by an absent-minded parent. The story that emerged over the next hour, piece by piece, through the police who were called and the records that were checked, was far more complicated and far more devastating than anyone standing in that mall had anticipated. Avery had been in the temporary care of a woman named Cheryl, a distant relative, while her mother, a young woman named Sasha, was 3 weeks into a rehabilitation program across town, the first real attempt Sasha had made to reclaim her life after years of struggling with addiction. Cheryl had brought Avery to the mall that afternoon and had not come back. Her phone went to voicemail. Her car was gone from the parking lot. Avery had been waiting for 4 hours. She had not cried because she was used to waiting for people who sometimes didn't come back. And that fact, that simple, terrible fact, settled over Marcus like cold water and did not leave him for a long time. The Department of Child Services was contacted. A caseworker named Patricia arrived within the hour, a tired-looking woman in her 50s who carried herself with the particular compassion of someone who had seen too much but had refused to become numb to it. She spoke with Avery carefully, gently, and then spoke with Marcus. She asked him if he would be willing to remain until they could reach someone from Avery's file. It was an unusual ask. He had no obligation. Owen was tired, and it was past his bedtime, and Marcus had work at 6 in the morning. He stayed. He stayed for 2 more hours. Owen fell asleep against his father's arm in a row of plastic chairs near the mall office, and Marcus sat awake, occasionally making sure Avery could see him from where she sat with Patricia, and each time she looked over, he gave her a small nod. Just a nod. As if to say, still here. He wasn't sure why he did it. He wasn't a social worker or a hero. He was just a man who knew what it felt like to have the floor drop out from under a child's life, because he had watched it happen to his own son, and he had promised himself on the day Renee died that he would never be someone who looked away from that kind of pain in another person. The story did not end neatly that night. Life rarely does. Avery was placed in a temporary foster situation while Sasha continued her program and the situation with Cheryl was investigated. But something unexpected happened in the weeks that followed. Patricia, the caseworker, remembered Marcus. She reached out, not with bureaucracy, but with a quiet suggestion. She told him that Avery had asked about the man and the boy from the mall. She had asked more than once. Patricia said she had been doing this job for 22 years, and she had learned to pay attention when a child asked about someone by description rather than name. It usually meant the person had made them feel safe in a way that was rare enough to remember. Marcus began visiting through the proper channels. It was slow. It was full of paperwork and waiting rooms and moments where he questioned whether he had any right to insert himself into a situation that wasn't his. Owen never questioned it. Owen, who spoke so little, made a drawing one afternoon of 4 people, 2 tall, 2 small, standing in front of a house with a yellow door. He left it on the kitchen table without explanation. Marcus kept it. By the following spring, Sasha had completed her program. She was fragile and honest and trying in the way that people try when they know they are building something for the last time. She met Marcus through a supervised visit. She cried when she heard how long her daughter had sat on that floor. She cried the way people cry when they realize the gap between what they meant to be and what their child experienced while they were gone. Marcus did not judge her. He had learned, through his own grief, that good people sometimes disappear into their pain, and the truest form of strength is the willingness to come back. Avery went home to Sasha in June. On the last day of the supervised visitation period, she wrapped her arms around Marcus's neck in the parking lot of the visitation center and whispered something into his shoulder. He would never repeat what she said, but he carried it with him the way he carried everything important, quietly, and for a very long time. If this story made you stop and think about the strangers who saw you through your hardest moments, or the ones you might have walked past without knowing, drop a word in the comments. Tell us what you felt. Sometimes the most important thing we can do is simply say, "I saw this, and it mattered to me." If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe, not for the numbers, but because somewhere out there, someone needs to be reminded that a single choice to stay can change the entire direction of a life.